Hello, everyone, and welcome to the meetup. Do you hear me well?
I can hear you.
Good. And
Can you hear me?
today we wait 5 more minutes for the participants, but welcome for who joined us today. And I'm Marina from Agile Göteborg. And today we have meetup about DevOps from Sukhbir and how we nurture in DevOps culture to underpin successful transformation. And feel free to present yourself. You can put camera on if you want or not. Johan, maybe you can present where you're from and where do you work right now, or your role. Johan Dalsner.
Sorry, I was in a dialogue here with a colleague. Sorry. Yes, I'm Johan Donster. I work for a consulting company here in Gothenburg called Sul Engineering, running that together with a couple of colleagues. So I'm involved in a little bit of everything, but also have a passion for how to build, successful teams. What's the factors behind that? So, but what I focus on and what I mainly do is business development and development of the company in general, trying to be a servant leader.
Great, thank you. What about you, Joy? What you working with? Or maybe Ravi can present himself. Ravi Shankar. Okay. So who can present themselves next? Maybe Sukhbir. You can start with presenting yourself, what you will be talking about. And who wants to present themselves after? You're really welcome. Or write in a chat if you don't want to unmute yourself. Just write a few words in chat. What's your role and where you situated in like Göteborg, Stockholm, maybe somewhere else in the world. So please feel free to write in chat.
I'm very entry level. I work as a my name is Alexander Onakwa. I work as a DevOps federal contractor, and I also work for a private company that supports legal matters on the IT side. I'm currently at work, so I'll probably be silent for most of it, but I'm here to learn about DevOps culture and hopefully put any thing I've learned that relates to what we're talking about.
Great, thank you, Alexander. Who wants to present themselves in video as well? Feel free to do so or write in chat. David, do you want to present yourself? Good. And I think there are more participants, so we won't be able to listen to everyone. So feel free to write in chat your name, maybe, and what you work with, maybe which company or something else you want to share with us before waiting for others. And welcome everyone, Alex, Henrik, Johan, Joy, Alexander. So we'll wait a few more minutes for others to join. Good. Oh, great. We have some presentations, and thank you for writing in chat where you're from. And welcome to new people joining us. Isabel, Noel, Pragyan, welcome. Please write in chat what's your current role, maybe company, and where you're situated right now, in which city, country. And we'll start just in a minute, so we just wait for more people to join. And today we have Sukhbir that will present on this meetup. And me, Linda, are from Agile Göteborg. In collaboration with Sukhbir, we're doing this meetup. So really nice to see you all guys here and girls. Sukhbir, maybe you can start. We already running 3 minutes out of time. And just to mention, you all can write questions during meetup. So we're trying to answer them as soon as it's possible. And some questions we can take after the meetup if they're not connected to just this slide, for example. So
thank you. Can you hear me okay? Enough? Marina, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you okay.
Okay, that's a miracle considering that I was struggling to get in with some Zoom updates. So I'm glad we sorted that out. Welcome everybody. I'm just getting a bit settled in after this last minute thingy, but we hope to make it a good session for everybody. We are, so just a very brief introduction. I have been in the tech sector for the last 25 years, working for large organizations, including some data center. You know, that's sort of where my career started, right? So really at the infrastructure and moved on to applications. And over the last a bit less than 2 decades, I've been involved in creating various tech ventures, etc., building technology teams, distributed teams around the world. And that's a little bit of where my experience has been based around. DASA was created in 2016 as a certification body in the emerging space of DevOps. We will be talking a little bit more about that at the back end of this. But that's not really the point of today. The point of today is to give all of you a feeling based on the experiences that DASA represents on behalf of many of our enterprise members, our community members consisting of experts in various related domains who've been part of transformation journeys for the last many years, decades, and we gather a lot of that. And so today, what we will be talking about, what I will be talking about, is not just a representation of what are my experiences, but they are experiences from large community that DASA represents. I assume the fact that you are here means that you don't find the topic of culture very touchy-feely, right? It's a very, how do you say, abstract topic, obviously. You know, how do you capture it, etc., etc. So the fact that all of you are here means that you find it important, relevant, and I am going to make the case for why it is absolutely the most important dimension of creating successful transformations, organizational transformations. So before we get started, and by the way, just, you know, as Marina mentioned, you are welcome to to share questions or comments, etc., in the chat. I have a colleague sitting right across who will be also monitoring that because I'll be probably too absorbed in delivering. But if you have any burning issues, which means you really want to share, that is also perfectly fine. We want to make sure that this is a interactive session. Everybody gets an gets an opportunity. It's a shared set of experiences, right? Which is what we believe in. So let's see if I can get the sharing going. Okay, so to tell you the truth, in order to get a slightly better idea of what we are, what I am faced with today, I am going to start with a poll question, and now I have to just figure out how do I launch this. Can you launch it? Or okay, there we go. So we're launching a poll, and basically the idea is if you can please sort of describe what your role is, so that we have a little bit of an idea, but everybody else also has some idea. There are probably too many options, and you might fit into multiple categories here, but see if you can sort of find yourself in the best possible category that is represented. And that will give us a better insight into what roles do you represent, what would be your interest, so that we can actually address that as part of this session. Are we closing it or?
Yeah.
I think 80% of the participants filled in a choice, so sort of representative, hopefully, of can everybody see this? Can you share the results or?
Yeah, they can.
Yeah, so now you should be able to see the results of the poll, right? So, I mean, it's a fair mix. There are key influencers or members of transformation teams, right? Guiding coalitions, as we call them. There are biggest categories: coaches, right? Internal, external, senior managers, leaders in IT organizations or IT departments, members of DevOps teams, and also some folks who are curious and are here to understand what DevOps is. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much. We can stop sharing this so I can move on. Let me hide this one. So we are going to start by setting some context. The organizations have evolved, and we are going to talk a little bit about what does this transformation all entail, just to set the context a little bit, right? So we live in this is not a new term, but we live in this is a new interpretation of the VUCA term, right? The volatile, uncertain, ambiguous world that we live in, right? So, but the complexity that we face today comes a lot from digital disruption, right? So organizations are obviously increasingly leveraging digital, and this is sort of a chart separating a decade, right, from 2009 to 2019, which sort of shows and highlights how the valuations of the organizations it's just one measure, but how the world is rewarding organizations who are taking on digital strategies successfully. So that is sort of a context in which we are operating. The the conversation today is not about VUCA world, but I just want to set the context, right? So there is obviously a lot of conversation around how do you deal with all these digital disruptions that are happening. And there are many schools of thought. And as you know, we look at terminology such as anti-fragile organizations. It's sort of not a new term again. Nassim Taleb actually wrote Anti-Fragile, a book where this is represented. And so if you want to understand more about this, encourage you to actually read that. But the idea is that in order to be able to deal with all the uncertainty and complexity and the ambiguity that that the organizations are facing, we need to adopt the anti-fragile traits, right? Which basically entail that, the more the uncertainty and volatility out there, the organizations actually thrive in such an environment, which is counterintuitive because typically organizations, in fact, don't like too much volatility, right? And so how do you become an anti-fragile organization, right? A lot of the conversations today will be around the idea that adopting principles such as from Agile, Lean, and DevOps ways of working are a way to create anti-fragile organizations. And so just in terms of some high-level characteristics, the anti-fragile organizations, consists of ideas such as systems thinking. Everybody knows what the organization is about, what the objectives are, and what we should be pursuing, right? The idea of that you don't need to manage every individual, right? People are self-driving, self-sustaining. They know which direction they want to move towards, autonomous, etc. Right? They believe in continuous experimentation. In fact, the organizations reward that, right? Continuous, experimenting, failures, try new things, etc. And that also implies disruptive product development. You're not afraid of cannibalizing your own business. Examples such as Apple, cannibalizing their Mac business with iPads, or so there are many examples of this, especially from the recent decades, which are sort of capture the characteristics of anti-fragile organizations, right? So that's sort of the context and the background of what we will be talking about. By the way, the organizational, the evolution of management practices is certainly not new, right? I mean, and this is a very interesting book by Frederick Laloux, who wrote a book called Reinventing Organizations. I'm sure many of you might have heard of it. For those who haven't, it's a breakthrough piece of management work. And basically, this is a chart which we borrowed from there, which sort of talks about that the management practices have continuously evolved, right? I mean, in the last 100,000 years, and especially focusing on the evolution which we have seen over the past 100 years, moving from shareholder perspective to stakeholder perspective to self-management perspective, right? That is sort of the self-directing perspective. So that is sort of the background of what we will also talk about, right? That's sort of the context in which we are going to be framing today's conversation. Again, very interesting book. If you're into management thinking, and then again, highly recommended as a read during Christmas period, I guess, right? With the vacations coming up. So let me set some further context by talking about key definitions. And the reason why we do this is because there are many definitions of DevOps out there, right? So we want to sort of set the context in terms of that we will be talking about Agile, which is basically, as you know, a software development philosophy. How do you build software faster, better, in a more efficient fashion, in an iterative approach, which sort of led to further evolution of thinking in terms of it's not just about building software, but it is also about automating as many steps as possible in this whole process and incorporating customer views, etc., which sort of led to the biz DevOps term being coined, which takes into account that it's not just the IT or the core IT functions, but it's also the business which needs to be involved in this process, in this thinking, right? So the idea is it's not just the IT organization which is transforming, it is the entire organization that is transforming for these principles to really provide the type of value. And we'll touch upon a little bit of that. So again, the idea of what we are going to talk about today in terms of the definition of it is not only about the definition of DevOps as in dev and ops, or even continuous integration and deployments, or automate everything, or even from project to product thinking, right? It is incorporating a lot of these ideas, right? Whether that is lean, whether that is Kaizen, Kanban, these are all methodologies and philosophies which in our view are part of the conversation, part of the transformation that the organizations are undertaking or should consider undertaking. And in our definition of the conversation around the transformations today, all of these methodologies for different organizations, different methodologies are relevant, right? Based on what they are trying to achieve. But all of these methodologies are sort of part of that thinking, which we are going to discuss today. And one more definition, this is sort of in context of, is it only the IT we are talking about, or is it a broader thing? When we talk about building good software, which is sort of underlying good products, increasingly in the increasingly digital world, right? Good products or good services that organizations offer. This is about using approaches such as value stream mapping, which is gathering a lot of interest in the industry. And then when we start talking about that, customer being central to the whole idea, means that the idea of ideation to creation to release and to operate takes into account not just the IT part of the organization, but it also means there is a stronger integration, stronger partnership between business and IT functions, right? So that's sort of an additional part of the context to take into account. So the conversation which we are having today, obviously the core part of that is IT, but when we think in terms of the value stream, we have to think about extending it also to business, because IT people very often don't know the customer as well as the business people do, right? So you can't create customer centricity until and unless people who understand and are closer to the customer are part of this this whole process. Okay, so let's talk about enablers for successful DevOps transformation. And before we do that, let's do another poll. So this is just a poll to get an idea of, is your organization doing something, and to get a scope of what is it that you are looking to do or achieve, right? So is it, are you not doing anything? Are you thinking about, are you doing at some smaller scale? Are you doing full scale organizational transformations, which means effectively your management, senior management, not just the IT management, but really board, executive leadership, etc., is aware, involved, supportive, those types of dimensions, right? So we'll give it a few more seconds. I do encourage everybody to please take a few seconds to just look through the choices and then indicate that we have about 55%. We want to get to 80%. So we'll give it a few more seconds, Joey. And while the results are still coming in, and I certainly don't want to preempt, but it is definitely interesting. I do get the opportunity to speak about this topic in various forums and regions, also around the world, across various geographies. I have to assume that the primary audience today is from Nordics, or at least from Northern Europe. Now, if that is the case, it doesn't completely surprise me, because in my experience over the past 2 decades being involved, 2.5 decades being involved in best practices, the Northern European countries tend to be pretty much at the forefront of adoption and thinking of new ideas, new practices. So the fact that approximately half the audience which have shared their views here are representing that they are in full-scale organizational transformation is not very surprising, but I have to say it is very welcoming. So I am impressed. I am incredibly impressed because large-scale transformations are complicated. They're tough, and you need to have very solid underlying business incentives to be able to undertake that. Can we publish the results?
Yeah, they are.
They are published.
Yes.
So, so in that regard, it is a reflection of forward-looking management and a culture which sort of takes into account that there is a need for digital transformation. Digital is driving; it's the future. But also, as part of that, the way we develop, build, and manage our software needs to evolve. So thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's inputs here. It sort of takes us into, so I think given that so many people here are representing the fact that their organizations are in full-scale transformations, I will keep the whole principles idea to the minimum, so that we can actually move to the core of this this presentation or this session today, and actually give everybody the opportunity to share their own experiences also, because that's the best way we can learn, right? Also from each other. A lot of the ideas which we will talk about are representing also the work that DASA has been doing over the past 6.5 years now. So the core DevOps principles, and they have obviously evolved as the understanding of what DevOps is and incorporates, etc., has also evolved over the past decade and a half now that this term has been around. But the principles are indeed customer centricity, autonomy, ownership, and responsibility at team level or at individual level. Automation, right? Automate everything that you can, and then with the idea of continuous improvement, right? So iterate, improve continuously, etc., etc. Those are some of the key principles. Now, there is obviously discussion around what are the dimensions of DevOps transformations. For the sake of simplicity, because I do have a lot of discussions with our stakeholders around what are the dimensions, and if you look at some of the products and guidance that DASA publishes. In one of the guidance that DASA published in the form of digital readiness assessment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We take 7 dimensions into account, but for the sake of simplicity, I have included 4 dimensions, right? Technology, process, people, and culture. As you can imagine, there is a lot of focus on technology relating to DevOps, right? Because a big part of the DevOps thinking, etc., comes from the vendor community, right? I mean, there are massive organizations, including Microsoft and Google and Amazon and GitLab and etc., all playing in this space, right? So technology is obviously a key component of it. So is process, right? But where we find, based on our research, based on our conversations, based on the data that we gather, where things typically tend to become more complicated and complex are when we talk about people and culture. When we talk about people in this context, it is about, do they have the right skills? Do they have the right capability? Do they have the right mindset to be able to operate in this new way of working and thinking? And from a cultural perspective, does the organization represent the right values? You know, does it reward the right things? And this is also where a lot of our focus today is going to be, right? We are not going to focus on technology principles. We can, another forum, also not specifically on the process, but primarily on the culture and somewhat on the people dimension. The organizations tend to have to organize themselves very differently than how they were typically organized, and they have to be de-siloed. You know, so instead of departments, when I started my career, you had applications department or organization, and you had a infrastructure organization, and you had a database organization, and and I'm sure for people who are as old as I am, you have all, if you worked in this sector, you have all seen that before, right? But the whole principle is of how we are transforming, how we are operating, and we will talk a little bit more about this, is de-siloed, right? Everybody sort of reads about it and understands it, but the focus is on customer outcomes, experiences, and that's how you sort of build fully functional teams or organizations, and your mindset has to evolve and change. And so given this, we have to think differently. So there are certain principles that DASA publishes, right? In terms of, if you want to become a high-performing digital organization, then these are some of the key principles which you have to adopt, right? And we have talked about these principles in the previous slides. But the key point is that it calls for a different type of leadership and management approaches, and that is something which we are going to start exploring from now on, right? So what is DevOps culture? Let's sort of explore that. Culture is a touchy-feely topic, right? But it's basically a sum of, and I'm just using one of the definitions, but it's a sum of values, rituals, approaches, how we tend to work, think, communicate, collaborate, which serves as a glue. I mean, you can have culture at a team level, you can have a culture at a department level, you can have a culture in a geography level, right? And this is what makes this a complicated topic. This is also where DASA does a fair bit of its work and research, because when you get into the discussion of culture, besides the organizational culture, you also tend to have the influence from an individual's culture perspective, right? Based on where they come from, their own personal values and traits, which they bring in any country, specific country or geography. While at a high level, you might have cultural traits, but at the individual level, that can vary based on your own value systems that you are brought up with, right? And so how do you effectively define that the culture, and how do you influence it, right? Cannot be achieved through a top-down mandate. I think I'm stating the obvious, right? It's sort of grown and nurtured. In terms of the specific topic at hand around DevOps culture, right? We emphasized already, we talked about already multidisciplinary, smaller teams, which have the autonomy, which feels the accountability for how the customers, the users actually work with the software which they build, right? And it is all about making customers' life and their experiences, how they are engaging with the software, right, better. This is a very oversimplified definition of what DevOps culture is, but it is the core. In the end, this is really what matters. Now, we can explore this a little bit further. So let's sort of do that. We've stated a few things, but what does it actually all imply? DevOps transformations, as you might know or read or actually believe, they are not about technology. They are about people. They are about talent. They are about mindset that people work with. And they have to sort of, this culture has to be sort of built, nurtured, etc. And this is not just an email that you write or a conversation that you have, but it's the values that you live by, right? The culture focuses on a service mindset, about building high quality products, about continuous improvements, support, as we talked about, and making sure that the overall health of the product or service that we are delivering is high quality, right? It is integrally about that, right? So all of this comes with managing the entire product life cycle and taking radical accountability. The concept of radical accountability is also crucial to establishing a DevOps culture, right? So given that the DevOps team is responsible for the overall health of software, which is powering your product or service, how do you enable that, right? So customer needs are central. We are sort of repeating that, but it is so core and so easily missed by many organizations out there, right? When they think about DevOps, they think about buying a new software, but that is only a very small part of it, right? DevOps culture also is about continuously learning, listening, learning, sharing, driving improvements, and create focus on quality. And it is not about dwelling on the problems, but it is about focusing on the results throughout the product life cycle. So let's talk about how do you approach this cultural dimensions and development, right? One of the most important building blocks of creating the right culture is creating the right climate for learning and for knowledge sharing. So we'll explore this. We're also going to talk a little bit about Ron Westrum, and the work that he has done in the space of defining an organizational culture, and it provides an interesting and a relevant framework to measure against. Creating an environment of psychological safety, employee engagement, and relating to that job satisfaction and personal identity. And I put in a quote here from senior leader within ING. ING is a Dutch bank, operates globally, as you know, and they embarked upon their transformation journey in mid-2000s, so 2005, 2006. DASA has also been a small part of their transformation journey, especially over the past 5-6 years. And their leaders actually very specifically also talk about the fact that the biggest challenge which they have had to tackle is driving this cultural change within their organization. And they have spent an enormous amount of energy, leadership time to role model, right? It is really about making sure you identify and build the right role models who demonstrate the ownership and the empowerment and the customer centricity as part of adopting these principles. So let's explore this a little bit more. Climate for learning, in my view, and by the way, DASA actually publishes frameworks to allow you to measure some of these elements, right? I mean, so we are not just talking about these are the cultural traits, but we are trying to actually do work in terms of giving you instruments to be able to ascertain and understand where you are, right? What is sort of your desired level, where you actually are today, right? And the decision on what is the desired level is really based around where you're coming from, what the business needs are, etc., and what the ambition of the organization is. But the climate for learning, so this is about creating openness where knowledge is not hoarded, but it is shared, right? Knowledge is not representing power as it has done in many organizations, still continues to do, but there is incentivization for continuously sharing that knowledge. It is absolutely the most important central building block for building a good, solid DevOps culture, right? Continuous learning is an important and an integral part of this. We are going to explore Ron Westrom's model in the next couple of slides, so I'll leave that for the moment. Creating an environment of psychological safety where people are allowed to make mistakes, they're allowed to voice their opinion without feeling that their career or them as individuals are at risk is critical. And that is not so easy. That is actually really complicated. On the other hand, it is absolutely important to create this environment where, you know, even people like Toyota-san, right, talks about that the real innovation and the real best ideas come from people on the ground, right? They don't always come from the leaders. And you have to create the environment to be able to capture those ideas, right? And so creating that environment of psychological safety is crucial. Job satisfaction, you have to create and focus on employee engagement. We'll talk a little bit about that further, and personal identity. I don't necessarily want to divert this topic too much, but we actually are also doing work in terms of saying how do concepts, movements, and work that is happening in the diversity and inclusion, how do they fit into this entire transformation journey that we are talking about? And there was a very interesting presentation that DASA hosted around diversity and inclusion and the relevance of it for IT organizations in their transformation journeys towards agile DevOps ways of working. So having the freedom to be able to have personal identity is also a very important part of creating the right environment. Ron Westerman, I think it was in the year 2004, published. So it's a couple of sort of decades old, but probably the best piece of work that I have come across in terms of defining the cultural typologies, the various typologies, and he takes a very stark view at it, by the way. I mean, it is quite stark the way he presents it, but I think it is still very relevant to look at it. But he talks in terms of identify what type of organization you are, what type of culture do you have, and use that as a baseline to figure out, do you have the right culture for what you're trying to achieve? There's no wrong culture, right? But there is potentially the wrong culture based on what you're trying to achieve as an organization, right? And so the work which he did was around safety, right? About having the psychological safety to be able to be who you are and speak up, etc. But that work has been taken into especially in the agile DevOps transformation spaces. And so in terms of the typologies which Dr. Westrom talks about, he talks about pathological organizations, right? Pathological organizations are, as you can imagine, they are, organizations driven by fear, right? Where there are political reasons, etc., for doing things in a certain way, right? Then he talks about bureaucratic, which are sort of rule-oriented organizations, where each department tries to become superior or tries to act superior, and they create rules, and there are books of rules and standards, etc., to keep themselves important and up. And then there is a generative typology, which is built around high cooperation, autonomy. Risks are shared, messengers are not short. People, failures lead to productive and progressive inquiries, type of thing, right? So the idea here is to be able to sort of reflect upon where you are as an organization. So he obviously talks about very stark, you're probably never in one of the three categories purely, but there are dimensions of it which can be leveraged to understand which are the areas which require more thinking and work in terms of evolution to the type of organization that you would like to work towards. Now, changing the culture, certainly not rocket science, right? Is a collective movement. It is not something which just comes from the top. It is probably, it represents muscle memory, right? Muscle memory, which has been built by working in a certain approach or methodology over many decades sometimes, and you can't change that muscle memory in days or weeks or even months, right? It requires continuous nurturing, continuous reinforcement, continuous support from the leadership, example setting, to drive that culture change. And by the way, I myself, in my own experiences in my smaller teams and organizations, have experienced how complex it is to drive these types of culture changes. And myself, having personally being very, very involved in continuously reinforcing the type of changes that we would like people to adopt, people to represent, and that takes time and a lot of nurturing. So when you hear organizations talking about, and I took the example of ING, They started their transformation in 2005. They are still in that transformation. Don't be surprised. I mean, transformations are tough. And when you talk about organizations representing tens or sometimes hundreds of thousands of colleagues, of professionals who need to change the way they work, and the dynamics have to change, and all of that takes time and sustained effort to accomplish. Now, I want to stop here for a minute or two. Actually, the timer here is 5 minutes, but I want you to, and you can't complete this exercise, but I want you to think about this for a few minutes. And please humor me. This is going to be probably an important exercise for you to at least reflect upon. Think about from all of the elements which you have heard, right, which include elements like service mindset and product quality and continuous support, but also some of the other elements which you have heard in terms of the cultural dimensions. Think about what is your current state and what is sort of the desired state based on your own understanding of the objectives that your organization has set for itself. What are the important traits that you would like your organization to let go, and what are the traits which you would like your organization to adopt? And we will take a couple of minutes, and actually we would like to request if anybody here would like to share their perspective very quickly. It's probably complicated to do that, especially if you're not fully satisfied with where you are. But we are offering full psychological safety here, so including anonymity if you so desire, to encourage you to share.
Maybe just to mention, if someone wants to share their reactions, you can put your hand up or put some other reaction, so we see that you want to share. It can be easier.
Yes. Or anybody who has any personal experiences or questions or comments that they would like to reflect upon or share. Johan?
Yes, hello. I would like to lift that I feel some part of my organization is that Dev and Ops is segregated, like there are two teams. And I would like to hear your opinion how to get them like a one team. Everybody is a Dev and Ops.
Yeah, that's a $1 million or a $10 million question, right? Obviously, but I appreciate you raising that point. Are you? I mean, it obviously depends on how do you initiate such a transformation. Our own experiences, based on all the conversations which we have with various individuals and organizations and professionals out there, that majority of these transformations don't start at the top level. They tend to start with one or two individuals who have who understand what opportunities these principles offer, have some influence or responsibility within their teams or within their departments or organization, and can create this small journey of transformation within their smaller departments or teams. So in my experience, based on all of the data and the conversations that I have had, the approach to start is like many organizations start. One or two individuals, they familiarize themselves with what the opportunities are. They study the theory. They go to some of the programs, some of the conferences. They understand and read about what the opportunities are and how to approach it, and they start taking it on at a small scale. That's how. And when you create small victories and results, right, and focus on low-hanging fruit to be able to demonstrate how it is benefiting the business objectives, that is when you get the attention of larger teams, etc. And that is when these types of transformations actually become larger scale. And we've seen this, without naming names, but we've seen this in many large and complex organizations also. So I don't know if that is a sufficient answer. I'm more than happy to have a more deeper conversation around it. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and we can definitely plan a deeper discussion. Would be more than happy to also put you in touch with and introduce some of the other colleagues who've gone through similar experiences. Because that is really what DASA is all about. We are a platform, industry body where we bring people together, and we sort of give the opportunity for them to share experiences and learn from each other, right? And of course, part of this process, we build guidance. Anybody else? And if not, then I will move forward. Some of these elements are now going to become a bit what will seem like repetitive. So we will go through this a little bit quicker, but they are important. So I do want to pass on some of these messages. Now, high performance teams represent the way the organizations who are adopting DevOps, they are sort of the building blocks of DevOps organizations, right? So we have this sort of framework that we use, right? This is from Richard Hackman, who is a Harvard University professor, who actually defined the 4 levels of allocating authority to, and this is really around high performance teams, right? So what is at the management level, what is at the team level? And when we start thinking about DevOps teams, you will see that the theory, and this is proven by experiences in the meantime, as the maturity of organizations who have adopted DevOps continues to grow, right? The team actually become much more autonomous. So they become much more self-governing. They can set increasingly their own directions, right? They understand what the business is trying to achieve, right? So while the objective setting is done at the management level, but the direction for how do you actually achieve those objectives, right? So the direction forward for the team is really done at the team level. And for leaders, it is very difficult to let go. For managers, senior managers, leaders, right? They do not want the teams to sort of make a mistake. And this is where the hardest part comes, is letting go and, making mistakes, fail fast, right? We sort of know these concepts. but doing it in practice and letting organizations make mistakes is, or teams make mistakes is sort of an integral part of it. That's really where the role of the coaches also becomes really, really important and fundamental to supporting, right? Coaches are about facilitating, are about coaching, right? Are often acting as sounding boards, type of thing. So to be able to offer that support mechanism, but then offer the autonomy, this is really what this message is crucially about. A core part of DevOps transformations is about building product teams, right? So the idea of moving from moving to product-based thinking is very central to DevOps way of working, right? And so setting up the team is sort of starts the journey, but giving them the opportunity to build and work towards high performance requires patience and time. And we need to give time for people to start discovering how best to operate as a high performance team. So there are some ideas here for you to consider, right? In terms of what are the typical behaviors, cultural dimensions, but also enablers that we can do to have high performance teams operate, grow, mature, and operate well, right? So knowledge sharing, we talked about this. They are multidisciplinary. We'll talk about this a little bit more. Empathy, transparency, fail-safe, prioritization, ownership, and continual improvement. So some of these words are coming back. Some of these words are probably new, but these are some of the behavioral traits, behaviors that we expect to see with successful DevOps teams, right? So when we talked a little bit about the psychological safety. So even within a team level, right, within a team, offering that psychological safety to team members is crucial, right? Creating structure and clarity, and making sure that the work which people are doing is meaningful. Now, what DASA offers in these to enable understanding and applying some of these principles is a team competence model. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Within the team competence model that DASA has, and by the way, it's available free of cost. You go to DASA website, you can do this exercise of understanding what if you are working in a sort of a DevOps team, or you're trying to work towards building a high performance team. This might give you a baseline and give some ideas in terms of how to, what areas that you need to nurture further. Clearly, there are knowledge areas, right? These are your technology skills or your process skills which you require in order to be able to operate as a DevOps team. And then there are certain other capabilities. These are somewhat behavioral, softer dimensions, right? Around courage. What does it mean to have courage? Be able to speak up, be able to contribute, feel equal part of the team, understand that the work which you're doing is meaningful. So a lot of these dimensions are actually covered in the team competence model. And we have seen over the years, literally thousands of organizations or teams, especially, who have benefited from this model by creating baseline and then working towards improving, nurturing the types of qualities which you want to see. So these are some of the deeper. By the way, we will share the slides, and you will have access to be able to go through this in more detail. But in terms of in terms of knowing that there are tools actually available to help you understand where your team currently is in terms of operating as a high performance team. Something which I want to leave you with. One of the things which we also find not only in the literature, but also in reality, the whole concept of DevOps teams is that the skills are distributed increasingly, right? So you talk in terms of what we call T-shaped professionals, right? Multi-skilled professionals, right? Who are not just able to do, sort of a traditional role which they were doing, but they have broader set of skills. So a developer can also test. I mean, I'm taking a very simplistic example, right? In the past, you had developers who would then pass on the code for testers, and then they would pass on the after the testing was completed, they would pass it on to service management people, or deployment engineers, etc., etc. And so, as part of the building high performance teams is to have multi-skilled T-shaped professionals, right? So we talk increasingly in terms of building more skills. And I know it sounds a bit hard, like, there are a lot of conversations I've had where people say, but they have to do their core work. Yes, but I think the whole concept of working in a high performance teams is to be able to support each other. You can create fail-safe by making sure that the skills are not only with an individual or a set of individuals, but they are broadly distributed such that other people can step in. And this is a thinking which has actually gone on. And I mean, I worked in with Silicon Valley companies over the past few years. This thinking has gone on to actually core business functions also, where we talk in terms of T-shaped professionals or full stack professionals, right? Where people are increasingly asked to be able to broaden your skill levels, and you become adept at being able to do a little bit of other roles and jobs also, which enriches your own role also tremendously. If you want to have a deeper discussion around this, more than happy to do that. Here's another quick exercise for you. And again, it's a reflection point. So just think about this, please. What are the biggest strengths and weaknesses of the current way of working that you have? Are you operating in high performance teams? Do some of the concepts which we have talked about in the last section, do they actually apply in your way of working, thinking? Are you striving towards some of these elements? And if you have the option, based on what we have discussed thus far, what would you like to see in the next 3 to 6 months? What changes would you like to be able to make in the next 3 to 6 months to be able to translate some of the theory which we talked about into practice within your own environment? We'll give you some time to reflect on it. And again, very happy if anybody would like to share your own perspective or own experience around any of these ideas. You can raise your hand.
Can we hear some experiences from Icarex or Saab or Volvo Cars? We have participants in the meeting from those companies.
I knew I should have brought some prizes for the best comments. So
I guess it's just some question that need to sit and think.
of course, yeah.
So maybe it takes some time.
We have Johan. We have Johan. Go ahead, Johan.
So sorry for taking your time, but I can give some experience from my work where I have where we have evolved the teams in their development phases. Like especially in the Nordic, we are quite afraid of harsh discussions, and I feel that the storming phase is often missed for evolving teams, so they are not afraid of arguing and see that nothing happens if I argue. I feel that especially in the Nordic that we are missing those kinds of development in the team or in the teams. So a recent experience that we had a lot of arguing in my team recently, and and now they are more expressing their opinions without hesitating, and they have really grown as team members in the team, and also as a team in deliveries and other areas.
Thank you very much for sharing. Yeah, it's fascinating. Really, I think you're absolutely right, and I think this goes back to creating an environment of respect and of psychological safety, where people feel that their ideas are not discarded. They are properly discussed, and they are properly addressed, and they are properly heard and listened to. And I think, every culture is a bit different, obviously, right? And so there is always going to be a cultural dimension to adopting some of these principles. So yeah, I'm glad that you have been able to create that environment in your team, Johan, where despite sort of the typical resistance to creating confrontational types of discussions or environment, you are still able to get people to contribute, share ideas in a respectful fashion, where people feel heard and they feel that their ideas are not discarded and they feel appreciated. So I mean, this is right. Yeah, this is fantastic. I mean, I can share from my own experience. I used to have a team based in Japan, and for those of you who are somewhat familiar with Japanese culture, typically, traditionally, very hierarchical, right? Boss is the only one who speaks, etc., etc., and everybody else listens, and everybody else doesn't express. And so it took me, I had a team for a decade and a half, and it took me a long time to nurture an environment where people would feel comfortable to be able to share. And it was always a true delight when we could have solid discussions and everybody felt that they had something positive to contribute. So any other comments? And if not, then we will move on and go on to our last topic of today. And I wanted to address this one because in the end, while everybody plays an important role in the transformation, leadership is very important, right? Everybody looks up to leaders within organizations, and the experience and the general rule is that the organization's level of consciousness can never exceed the leader's level of consciousness, right? So that is sort of the reality and the experience which we have. People look up to leaders. They look at how leaders are behaving. And so part of digital leadership is to adopt new ways of leading, right? And so DASA offers a program called DASA DevOps Leader Program, and it's a multi-session program where we sort of help people explore about their own leadership styles and approaches, and try to help them reflect on what their organizations are trying to do, and if that leadership style fits with the objectives, etc. How can they evolve it? So we sort of help them as part of the transformation journeys that the organizations are taking, digital transformations, or within those digital transformations, IT or DevOps or agile transformations, right? As part of those, we help reflect upon this. And so these are some of the elements which are quite important to consider, and it's not something which we can get all done today, but we offer we do a lot of work in this area and build and offer leadership frameworks for leaders to think about, depending on what their organizations are trying to achieve. Think about personal leadership, facilitative and transformational leaderships, depending on, again, which stage the organization is as part of the transformation journey. And so there are two key leadership roles which we talk about. Actually, depending on the discussion, it's 2 or 3, right? I mean, we talk about the leader, organizational leader who takes the accountability and drives a lot of the sort of business objectives and direction, and facilitate, and interfaces with external dimensions. And the coach, who is an enabler and a catalyst, is a key influencer, acts as a go-to person for many teams and team leads, is a sounding board, is a facilitator, and they create focus on process and capability, as an example, right? There is a third role which I did not take, but that of a product owner role, right? When we talk about DevOps, as I said, there's a massive movement towards product thinking, right? Within IT organizations. IT organizations were typically project organizations. They would work on projects, they would complete, move on. There is an increasing movement and thinking around product based teams, right? And so product owner role is also becoming a very important role within the IT organizations, and that role is quite immature, I have to say. Based on my own experiences within organizations, that role is not very well understood. It's immature. I mean, product owners in a way act as business leaders in a way, right? In their own rights, sort of mini CEOs type of thing. So anyway, the leadership level and layer, and saw from the poll that many of you are leaders, right, within your organizations. So there are some ideas which I would like to present and share, right? You are not the only digital leaders within the organization, but you are an important part of that process, right? So the idea of when organizations are looking to adopt, a digital approach, you have to take also the others along and into account. Digital is not a project or an initiative; it's a mindset. You are not only focused internally, but you have to focus on understanding the end customer that you're serving. And that means reach out to the business, reach out to and make the effort to understand what is it that you're trying to serve, right? And you have to lead by example, and lead also by limiting the amount of intrusion that you are doing. So the leaders can represent these values in multiple different forums, right? We talk in terms of Gemba walks, talk in terms of doing all hands meetings, or building the idea of failure sessions, right? Building building delegation practices, right? There's a lot of thinking and work which we also represent and do in terms of how and when do you delegate, and how do you allow people to effectively be able to grow, right? So a big part of it is actually growing future leaders. And so part of it is by allowing them to be able to feel the ownership. There is a massive need for investment in leadership development, especially when organizations are taking such massive transformations. I mean, we didn't really reflect upon it, but all the management literature, whether you're reading around digital transformations, would tell you that 80% of the digital transformations fail to produce the results that they were designed to set out, when they were initiated. And I mean, and if you look through the literature of the analysis of whether it's McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group or Deloitte or any of the management consulting organizations which study this and put these into practices, right? A lot of it is around leadership, right? Business leaders fail to link the business objectives with actual practices that are happening and taking place. They fail to recognize that the organizational culture needs to evolve. So there are many of these reasons, and so a lot of it resides with leadership, right? And so the leadership development is incredibly important to stem this flow of failures, which is such a massive waste of resources for organizations to be failing in 80% of their transformation initiatives, right? And so there has to be a mechanism, and we believe that a lot of that actually starts with building the right leaders and having the right leadership development programs. So at this stage, would like to invite all of you. There is, by the way, a link here. I don't know if it's possible for us to put this in the chat. But just think about this, please, for a couple of minutes. And there is a framework which we use, and think about this and try to see if you can use the scale. And this is not about finding weaknesses. It's certainly not odd at all that you will, if you do proper self-reflection, that you will identify areas, because these are characteristics. There is no right or wrong. There's nobody who is on level 5 of in terms of competence or capability across everything. It is about, are you in the right organization? Are you in the right place? Do you represent the right values? Do you understand how you can personally grow as a leader to be most relevant to the organization that you are part of in terms of representing the business objectives that the organization is trying to drive? But also understand, is your own leadership style conducive for the type of organization and the type of transformation that the organization is undertaking? If anybody has any ideas and feedback, again, would be very welcome. In which case, we would move on. I just have a couple of very brief slides about DASA. We focus on 4 areas: publications. So we build guidance, also through working groups, which are, voluntary experts who come together. DASA facilitates them to work on topics of their interest, where they also learn from each other, produce guidance, which then is applied within various organizations and is adopted, and there is a process of continuous improvement, right? So they are effectively acting as high performance teams, and we support research initiatives and community analysts. In terms of our value points, it is really across the board. So we have a talent academy to enable organizations to embark on this continuous learning and continuous improvements, not just in terms of skills, but also in terms of capabilities, to make it very practical. If they want to, let's say, understand how to build, user stories or become better at doing that, they can sort of just go in and take a course or refer to certain material that we incorporate. There are hundreds, thousands of different learning interventions which are part of it. We nurture communities, we build scans to help organizations improve. So and obviously we do courses, or DASA does certifications. We are not a training provider ourselves, but we build the right guidance in terms of the types of certifications for various roles, which would be relevant for organizations embarking on this journey, whether this is for new employees or for existing employees. One of the things which I wanted to reflect upon was the fact, I mentioned this, that we have a digital readiness assessment, which is sort of a reflection of the current state which you are at in terms of your readiness to be able to embark upon on a transformation or to the next level. It is about determining the fluency, right, of where you are and where can you evolve towards. This is based on 7 different dimensions, as you see at the bottom: strategy and governance, organization leadership, technology, flow, culture, and people. Again, something which can be beneficial for you to even take on internally, if you so choose, right? To establish a baseline for yourself. And so let me see. And I think the last thing, this is a representation of our certification scheme, which we support, DevOps fundamentals to establish the baseline and common vocabulary among everybody, and then more advanced levels for specific roles, and a leadership series for the leaders to reflect, understand, improve their own capabilities. And finally, I have my email address here if you want to reach out for feedback, comments, questions. If you have the interest in joining our communities, build your own personal skills or personal brand, right? Or focus on enhancing your teams or organizations' skills, capabilities, credentials in the DevOps, Agile, Lean, etc. spaces, then please feel free to reach out. And at this point, I would like to see, given that we only have a few minutes left, if anybody would like to share any feedback, comments, questions that we can that not only I, but anybody else can perhaps look to answer.
I do have a question about the DevOps leader competency model scan. This seems like a self-retrospective exercise, right? So you, as a leader, would sit down and fill it in at one point in time, and then, I don't know, after the lapse of maybe a couple of months or so on, you would sit to it again. Or is there any other setup? Should it be conducted in some kind of workshop with other fellow leaders in the organization? What is the ideal setup for it here?
Most of the times, so DASA offers a leadership framework, which, by the way, is available, and you can use it, download it, and indeed, at the minimum, it offers you some theory and some guidance in terms of what are the skills and capabilities to evaluate and think about. But of course, leadership development is a complex process. It is not so much about knowledge and learning, but it is about self-reflection and and building behavioral and other capabilities, right? And so we offer a leadership program where you effectively are part of other leaders, and so you go through this program, and that is obviously a very important, where there is a facilitator who is helping you assess on a personal level also what are your leadership styles and approaches, by giving you a theoretical framework, which then you work through. So it consists of 8 sessions spread over 8 weeks. So there's a weekly session. And as part of this process, you are also encouraged to develop a transformation plan for your team or for your department or for your organization. So you're effectively understanding what are the leadership principles that are required, but also what is the transformation approach that is required as part of what your organization is trying to achieve or your department is trying to achieve. And so that's another approach or a way of doing it, right? But indeed, at the minimum, what we would encourage is to reflect upon it. Self-reflection is a very powerful thing. Facilitated reflection is, in such a program, is even more powerful, right? We also have many examples where organizations are doing these programs internally as part of their leadership teams. And so also in Nordics, by the way. So you can also consider that. bring your leadership team together and conduct such a program, because in the end, it is not about an individual leader. It is about leadership layer, all of them aligned on what are the right, what is the right leadership approach, and establishing that framework together, developing a common understanding of it, developing a common vision for where you're trying to go towards. So I hope that helps.
Yes, that answers it very well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Marina, back to you, I guess.
Yes. And I'll just put the video if you see me at the moment. Now maybe. Good. Do you hear me well?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Please go
Thank you
ahead.
so much, Sukhbir, for this really great meetup and presentation. And we share
Thank you.
slides with everyone in 1-2 weeks and recording as well. And if you have any further questions, thoughts, suggestions, whatever, you can always contact us, me on LinkedIn or Agile Göteborg, and Sukhbir on his provided mail address, or I don't know if LinkedIn can be easy as well.
Yeah.
So
Also, yeah. Please connect to me at the minimum. I would love to connect with all of you and be part of your transformation journeys and or personal growth. I mean, in the end, that is as fulfilling for us as anything else.
thank you so much. And if you have any further thoughts, you can always ask. So you're really welcome. And hope you will have a great evening on Thursday, and we'll see if it's better to have meetups any other days. If you have those kind of suggestions, write to us as well.
Thank you all. Thanks, Marina, for having me and having us at DASA. So appreciate it.
Thank you so
very
much.
much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
much.
Bye, everybody.